Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, The Insider's Guide to a Successful Security Awareness Program. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. We understand that your time is valuable, so we plan on making a great impact in the little time we do have. My name is Serena Pillay and I'm your moderator today. In terms of our agenda, you can look forward to common security practices your users are ignoring right now, how to plan for success, ways to win hearts and minds, and pitfalls to avoid. Our presenter today is Damian Grace. Damian is the founder and general manager at Friendly Phishing. He led the ethical hacking team at Shearwater Solutions for over 8 years, where he saw the impact of phishing on organizations. Friendly Phishing, the training product he founded, currently provides training for hundreds of thousands of users across Australia and New Zealand. With that, I'd like to hand over to Damian.
Thank you, Serena, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. I think we've got some pretty interesting content to cover with you today, and so I really hope that you enjoy what we get out of it. Now, to start off with, I think it's important to understand a little bit around sort of the state of the world, state of security as it stands right now. And as an IT security consultancy and also with our Friendly Phishing and general security awareness training products, we see quite in depth into a vast array of different organizations and other components that's going on around the world. And we've been able to see some of the key things that we're noticing as core security fundamental issues and things that are really important to make sure you're addressing as part of your awareness training and your programs. So the first thing, and this will probably be no surprise to anyone on the call, phishing is still what we're seeing as the #1 risk. There's a few reasons for it. One of them is that it's such an easy attack vector. For coming from an ethical hacking background, I know that we can actually, if I was to take a laptop, put it onto your network, it'd probably take somewhere between sort of 4 and 6 hours, and we'd get access to, potentially a domain admin or pretty much anything that we'd want within an organization. Once you get that initial foothold, the organization typically crumbles, or the security crumbles. And what we're seeing with phishing, one of the attack vectors is obviously injecting malware into an organization or getting access to a host. And they're able to do that from around the world. And once they've got access to that host, then it's the same as being sitting on that network. That security typically folds. So it takes people a very small amount of time to get access to an organization and to get what they're after through a phishing attack. And it's a very low cost and very successful mechanism. So this is the #1 attack we're seeing at the moment. Now, we're also seeing that technology is still being bypassed. We're seeing people talking about how they're going to eradicate phishing and the like. It doesn't look like something that is going to happen anytime soon. We do see that technology is very important. You need to have your gateways and the like, and you need to be filtering for specific attacks. But an advanced attack, or one that's not common out there, is actually still going to get past your technology relatively easily. And this includes things like antivirus as well. Writing malware to get past antivirus is relatively trivial. It's usually once it's propagated a lot throughout the world that it starts to get picked up, and the antivirus can identify that with ease. Another one we're seeing, and I've got an example of this type of attack coming up. Business email compromise is kind of the new way of attacking organizations. It's really started to ramp up in terms of how often we're seeing it. And we're probably seeing at the moment a business email compromise through our managed security services at least every 2 weeks, if not weekly. So it's something that we're seeing ramping up, and we're also seeing something that it's an attack vector that will really allow people or the attackers to gain potentially a lot of money on the back end of it. So that's why it's starting to take off. And I've got an example walkthrough of how this type of attack occurs. This was a real live compromise that I'll walk you through in a few minutes as well. Coupling to that is the way that mobile users have propagated within an organization. It's not just the BYOD devices, it's also your laptops and components as well. Once upon a time, you could have a network that was very secure in terms of really solid shell. Quite often it's still soft and squishy inside, but that shell was secure. And now with the mobile devices, mobile users, it's breaking down those security. You don't know where your users are necessarily working from. They could be in an airport, they could be at the cafe using their Wi-Fi, and this opens up a huge amount of new attack vectors that you need to be aware of. And then the last one is that we're seeing that huge rapid uptake in the cloud. Office 365 is a great example of that, where so many organizations have gone to that model, and then Dropbox and all of those other ones. This type of uptake again extends your security perimeter. It needs to go out further, and it also means that it's by design, it's designed to be accessed from anywhere. And so this makes it a lot easier for an attacker to take and get access and take the information they need, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's coming from within your organization anymore. So I did mention I had an example of a RealWorld BC attack that we've seen. So this one occurred just literally a few weeks ago. This one was of particular interest just because we happen to be on site. Like I said, we do see this quite often through our managed security services, but this one, it will give you a good understanding of how it occurred. So the way this worked is one of our employees arrived just to do a friendly phishing sales call. And when they arrived, he was advised that the company was actually dealing with a live phishing incident at that time. He called our managed security services team, who were able to help them respond and determine, what actually happened. And so what happened is the first thing that happened is the attacker sent through an email that looked quite benign. You can see here it's a password reset or password expiry email. After you've done training, this is the sort of one that you should be able to identify. I haven't shown the underlying links here, but it wasn't insanely complex. And what else is interesting here is that this particular email, through our friendly phishing threat feed that we're building, we've been able to see this particular email hit actually a lot of different clients. It's actually propagating quite heavily within the world at the moment. So they get this email, they click on the renew link, and it takes them to a website. This website, you can see here, obviously this is a test version, but they actually insert the email address of the user into the email, so it looks like it's personalized, looks like it's quite real. You can't see the URL in this screenshot, but the URL, again, with a bit of training, you could see that it wasn't part of the Microsoft domain. And it's just asking them, and you can also see that it wasn't secure, so it wasn't HTTPS, definitely something that Microsoft would not miss. So the victim in this case, they inserted their details into the website, and then after that, the attacker then went and logged into their Office 365 account using those stolen credentials. Once they are in there, they set up some forwarding rules to forward all email that hits that account to the attacker-controlled account. This allows them to see everything that's going into the account without requiring to log in all the time, so they can just remotely monitor the account. And then from there, they did some searching, and they ended up finding an ongoing payment process or payment transaction that was happening from this account outbound. And outbound and inbound, going both directions. So they found that transaction. They then went and registered a domain that looked like the third party at the end of that transaction. It was actually quite a similar domain, and this doesn't always happen. This actually makes this particular attack a little bit more advanced than what we typically see. They also changed the phone number as well in the email that they sent out. So They sent out an email pretending to be that third party to the victim, requesting that all due payments now be paid into the international trading, or their new international trading bank account. So what's interesting here is that from from compromise to hijack, this was less than 24 hours. It's a very, very quick attack. There was an internal process error that resulted in a financial loss. This is something that we see all the time. Usually, most organizations will have some sort of internal process, like if someone's asking to change bank accounts, make sure you check with them on the phone or via some other means. In this case, this didn't happen, and the organization initially lost over $1 million. So they were able to recoup some of this, but there was still a significant loss. And so it's a very, very quick, very easy attack vector, and something that people really need to be educated on, especially if they're handling financial information. Now, during this webinar, we're just going to do a few quick polls as we go through. So this is the first poll question. If you could take part, that'd be wonderful. And then at the end of the webinar, we'll actually run through these results. So are your executives more aware or less aware of the need to build a security awareness culture than what they were 12 months ago? Okay, thank you for filling that in. That's actually, just looking at the results here, there's some interesting, it's a little bit different to what I was expecting. So again, we'll go over these at the end of the webinar and explain to you what we're seeing. So obviously, like I said before, we're engaging through training and through our consulting services, we're engaging with many different clients, and we're seeing quite common trends, things that we're seeing across employees that are still a significant security risk. So let's run through those quickly. The first one being opening email attachments. This is one that's been going on for obviously a long time. It has significant risk to the organization in that through opening these attachments, they can execute things like ransomware, which locks you out of all of your data, or they can actually embed malware into that machine and do that attack vector that I mentioned before, where now they've got access into your environment, and then they can propagate and start to pull out sensitive information. We're also seeing clicking on email links. Again, same sort of attack vectors, can kick off ransomware, can install malware, but we're also seeing this one used heavily for credential capture at the moment as well. And then obviously credential capture can lead to the attack vector that we saw just before. It also leads into that next point. So credential capture is actually on the rise, specifically around the Microsoft environment. There's been a big campaign lately around getting Microsoft credentials, O365 credentials. So if you're using that type of service, then it's definitely worthwhile looking into, one, educating your users and to make sure they're not going to do it, and how to evaluate if it is an illegitimate site, but also looking at ways that you can potentially protect your O365 environment from this type of attack. An interesting one that we see quite often is actually replying to emails. Now, we will send out a phishing email, for example, and it might be something like, we've missed your delivery, or we have the incorrect delivery address for a parcel. And quite often, rather than clicking on the link, which is what we're trying to achieve with that particular phishing email, they'll actually respond to us and say, oh, thanks for reaching out. Here are my new updated address details, or things like that. And so this replying to emails can actually have a couple of interesting effects. So first of all, they're potentially sharing sensitive information. And this one, for the stakeholders within an organization, is very hard for you to track. Knowing how many people are responding to phishing emails is a very hard one for you to know until you actually understand, until you know what that phishing email is, and then you have to backtrack to find it. Also, what it does is it allows the attackers to now know that there is someone at the end of that email address. Normally when they're trying to attack people, when they're doing that sort of spray and pray approach, they don't actually know if there's anyone at the end of that email. They could have moved on. They have no idea. Now they have positive confirmation that there is someone there, which then can allow them to target them more specifically or more regularly, which then increases that risk. We're also, and I've sort of touched on this already, is sharing sensitive information, allowing users to understand what the value of their data is, the data that they're looking after, the data that they need to protect, what the value of that is, and then understanding what that means and understanding how data can potentially leave the organization and what their responsibilities are around that data is actually very important. And so we're seeing the leaking of sensitive information, not just from phishing emails through replying, but also through phone calls, even through face-to-face interactions, leaving things lying around where they shouldn't. We're seeing that type of thing happening quite a lot. And then last one is tailgating. Through our ethical hacking services, we do a lot of red teaming, and tailgating is one of the easiest ways that our team find to get into an organization. And we're not just talking, a supermarket. We're talking potentially highly secure environments or international conferences that you shouldn't be able to get access to. Things like this where tailgating and even if they do get stopped, which is obviously good, it's good that they're stopping people. Quite often they give a fairly loose excuse as to what they're trying to achieve or why they're there, and quite often they'll go, okay, no problem, and let them in. Even to the point of being able to get into server rooms quite often. And some of the times they're actually able to sit in the environment for 24 hours, or all day long, come in the next day even, and basically become part of the furniture. So it's actually one that a lot of people don't think about, or they don't realize what the risk is with that, but it actually can be quite devastating. So now, some of the things that are potential issues, well, what do you do to create an environment or a change in culture that allows you to start to protect yourself from this? So firstly is you need to understand what it's going to look like. What will the end look like? So is it realistic to say, I'm not going to have anyone click on any phishing emails from now on? That's not possible. So that's not realistic. You need to understand that this is a layers game. So like I mentioned before with the technical controls, we're able to bypass them, but they're still really important to have in place because they weed out that first layer of potential security issues. Then you need to work on the next level, which is typically the human side of things, and give them the skills and the tools and the frameworks to be able to make smarter decisions. And if you can get them to make smarter decisions, you're going to reduce the risk that they're going to click on as many things or instigate, some sort of breach. But it's never, ever going to be a silver bullet. You also need to understand your audience. So in most environments that we see, your audience is going to be a non-technical user. And so by non-technical, I mean, they can use a computer, they use their phone, they use their computer, and they're potentially really good at the job they're doing. But if you ask them to do something a little bit more technical, like break down a URL or something like that, their eyes are going to glaze over, they're going to freak out. It's not what they're about, it's not what they're interested in. And so taking a non-technical person to the point of understanding a technical subject such as phishing, as an example, will take time. This is part of that realistic goals. It's not an overnight fix. You can't give someone training for 3 minutes and now they're experts. It's just not the way it works. Which goes into that next point, which is really it's not an overnight fix. This will take time, without a doubt. And then also, you can't try to do it with a, here's some training once a year for Cyber Week, and now you're done. It needs to be built into the fabric of the organization. You need to make sure that you're building this security culture within an organization. Now, anyone that's tried to change a culture of an organization or enhance a culture of an organization knows that it takes time. But you need to work at it and chip away at it continuously to build that culture. But once you get there, the results are dramatically different. Again, I've been into so many different organizations, and the ones that have that security culture, it's just an amazingly different environment to those that don't have that security culture, and they tend to perform a lot better. So now we know what it looks like when we get there. What are some of the things you want to avoid before you kick off? The first thing is making sure, and this really goes along for phishing, but it can be tied across other components as well, is tricking is not training. So you can't send out really hard phishing emails every month, every couple of months, or every quarter and expect people to, one, be happy about it. People don't like to be tricked at all. And it's not training. You know, it's like trying to learn an advanced math equation. I can send out an advanced math equation and people are just going to go, whoa, this is just way too difficult for me. And they're never going to understand it. Even if you give them a little bit of basic training, they're not going to understand it because it's advanced. And that's what phishing is. You send them another one and they're still not going to get it. It doesn't matter how many times you send this to them, they're not going to get it. They need to slowly build up and learn and to grow with basics. You start off with the 1+1s and the 2+2s, and then you build up as they become more proficient. Again, going back to understanding the audience, it's really important not to assume their knowledge. One of the things we see quite often when we go into stakeholders is they'll look at the training, and the training is not, you know, like in our instance, our training is not built for technical people. It's built for non-technical people. And so a person that has a technical knowledge will go and have a look at it, and the feedback we quite often hear is, this is not suitable for my audience because it's going to be too hard. Or this is not suitable for my audience because it's going to be too easy. But what we say is actually go and test it on the people it's made for. Make sure you understand who you're targeting. You give them that training, and often the overwhelming response is, wow, this is fantastic. This is exactly what I needed. So it's really important as a stakeholder not to assume you know what skill levels they're at, but actually to test them and evaluate and make sure you actually know rather than assuming. On that, it's really important that you don't give people too much too soon. You don't want to overwhelm them. And you also want to make sure you're not giving them too little. You don't want to go, okay, here is 3 minutes of training and you're done. You know, again, as I've said, that really doesn't work. Another really important one is making sure that they have context. So when we started building our general security awareness training package, we did a lot of research into what was out there in the market. And one thing that we found was, and you probably hear this as well when you're trying to do different types of training, is people saying, I don't know why I'm doing this, you know, it doesn't apply to me, you know. And so by giving them context and actually focusing specifically on giving them context, it allows people to understand how it affects them, how it can affect their family, what they need to care about versus not care about, how the world has changed to now make them a target, as an example. And by giving them that context and making them actually see why it matters to them, it changes their engagement with the product. Now they're like, okay, I need to know this. This is actually important because I need to protect my family. I can see the repercussions, and now that they buy into it, they have more interest in it, and it's a completely different learning environment. And again, really helps push that change in culture. Another one is to make sure that there is no repercussions for things that they do wrong. Now, that doesn't mean they can go and click on everything. That's not the case, but what you want is an open communication channel between the people in security and maybe service desk, wherever they're reporting particular issues or security issues to, and the people that are reporting it. You need a very strong bidirectional communication channel here. It's something, again, when we were doing research and something that we see in our consultancy, there's often this very strong wall between the security people in an organization and everyone else. And by breaking that down, that wall, and allowing people to fail without the fear of repercussion, it allows people to start to feel more comfortable, because people don't work very well when they're in a fear state. So they become more comfortable. They're more happy reporting things, and it starts to give you more visibility around what's going on within the organization. Specifically around phishing, many organizations don't really know what phishing emails make it past their technology controls. Whereas if you start to allow people to report without repercussion, then you start to know what's getting passed, and you start to know if it's been executed on as well, rather than people just hiding it from you. And then also, you can't just go out and say things like don't click on links. You know, that doesn't give people good, clear meaning to what they're trying to achieve. Give them a framework. Give them the ability to become educated to a point where they can make clear, concise, and educated decisions. Now, this could be in the form of a set of questions that they need to ask themselves sort of day in, day out, or it could be in the form of a way to evaluate certain things that come into the organization. But by giving them that framework, something that you can put around the organization, that you can promote, then it allows them to make those much better, clearer decisions. So we'll just run into the second poll here. Again, we'll give you 30 odd seconds to go through it, and then we'll give it a recap at the end. So what best describes your organization's security awareness posture? Okay, that's another interesting one there. So just reading through the results, it's good. We'll cover this again at the end, but the lowest result on that is a little bit shocking to me. So, all right, so let's move on to the next stage. And thank you for your participation in this as well. Okay, so let's say you go, okay, now I'm going to create this training product or training program, I should say. Communication, the way you communicate to your organization, is actually incredibly important. So how do you do it effectively? Firstly is any cultural change, any initiative like this needs to come from as high up the tree as possible. If you can get it pushed down from the CEO level, it will make it a lot more effective than if you're pushing it down from a mid-level manager level. So wherever possible, you need to get that buy-in from that CEO level and get them to do a lot of the communication. Now, you can write the communication plan for them, but just have it coming from them. That can make a tremendous difference to the amount of people that actually complete the training and that engage with it. Giving people a reason to care. So this is very similar to what I was saying before about context. You can start this context. You can start to give people a reason to care before they even get to the training. Now, the communication plan that's built should focus very specifically on how this program or whatever you're trying to achieve will help them. What it will give them going forward, how it will help them protect their family, etc. Because focusing it on their family and their home life is going to be a lot more effective than focusing it on your organizational goals. Quite often, more often than not, people care a lot more about themselves than what they do for your organization. Now, it's also important to treat people with the respect they deserve. IT people historically have been guilty of making people feel inferior, and it's very important to understand that what you're giving them is going to be difficult. Again, these people aren't technical people. They have their own domains of expertise, but they are not technical people. So you really want to help people feel comfortable rather than feeling like they're inferior. This can be done at every touch point. The way that you respond to reported phishing emails, the way that you put things up around the organization or send out training. It's very important to understand and respect the people for where they are. And another big one, and this is really about the success of the overall program and getting that buy-in, is make sure that all of the key stakeholders are involved up front. You don't want to be going, oh yeah, by the way, I just sent out a training email to everyone last Monday, and security, IT security are going, whoa, hang on, this is my domain, why are you doing that? Now they're going to start to push against it. Even if it's the best program in the world, they will start to push against it. Or you start running a phishing campaign and HR go, whoa, what's going on here? You can't do this. You know, or they don't know what's going on, so they start to push against it, or maybe even they can it. By getting them involved early and up front, now you can actually put together, again, strategic ways of dealing with these different groups, giving them the information they need, like HR, for example, showing them how you're not tricking the users or setting up a notification plan, whatever that is. You get them involved, you get their buy-in, and you can, again, change the way that it's taken within the organization. People will buy into this in a much stronger way. Now, also going a full saturation approach is really good. Now, I use Cyber Week as an example. We have this Cyber Week thing where, okay, quite often we hit Cyber Week, everyone goes and does a, you know, IT security or IT training, which is great. Everyone needs to do that. But again, it's not just a one-time thing. So when you start off these programs, you should be building in a full saturation approach. It needs to obviously tie in with your other training initiatives, but how can you roll this out? How can you have different posters, potentially screensavers, and we have one of our clients, for example, all of the TV screens around their organization that put up a little video from us. Actually, we've got a handbook, by the way. If you have a look at the handout section in the webinar here, you can see we've got the Friendly Phishing Handbook, Employee Handbook. They turned that into a video and put that all around the organization. And by giving them, you know, you've given them a framework, you've given them a new way of looking at things. Now make sure it's in their mind. It's like marketing, you know, or branding. You just want people to be seeing snippets of it everywhere. But again, it's not just a weekly thing. You want to show constantly chip away at that. So you might start off with a full saturation approach and then have other strategic measures in place as you go to make sure that you're continually refreshing people's memories to this type of thing. So finally, just a couple of tips and tricks. So what you really want to do is provide long-lasting learning. Giving that 3-minute video annually, that doesn't provide long-lasting learning. They're going to forget about it 3 minutes after they've done it. And so you really want to have strategies in place that provide long-lasting learning, that get people interested, get people's buy-in, make them become part of the training process. And again, you want to focus on training, not tricking. Now, there's this, if you think about the way people learn, people have their own little comfort zone. They have this little zone where they're very comfortable, and if they start to stretch outside of that zone, then it starts to make them feel a little bit uncomfortable. The further outside of that zone they go, the more uncomfortable they will feel. And so you want to get a successful program running, you want to stretch people so they're just going outside of that comfort zone until they become comfortable with it and they bring that into their comfort zone and their comfort zone grows. And then you stretch them a little bit further and then they grow a little bit more, you know, and if you keep on doing this, over time their comfort zone will grow and they'll become, you know, really good at doing whatever you're trying to achieve. If you try to take them too far out of their comfort zone, they'll start to shut down, they'll push against it, and you will absolutely not get what you're trying to achieve. And then that really comes down to that building a security culture. Make sure you're getting that top-down buy-in. Make sure you're giving them something that they want to do. Now, most people don't want to do IT security training. They have a fear reaction to it, you know, because normally it's dull and boring and people don't like it. If you use the strategies that we've just discussed, if you give them a reason to want to do it, you make it fun, you make it regular, and you make it interesting, then all of a sudden there's a completely different level of buy-in, and you can change that culture, and then obviously slowly build them up. Start off with baby steps and then build them up until they become experts. So that's the end of the webinar from my side. I will be handing back over to Serena to do a quick Q&A, and please make sure you hang around to the end because we will be going over those poll results, and we do also have a special end of financial year offer for you guys as well. So Serena, thank you.
Thank you, Damian. That was a really great presentation. I think your findings really highlight that need to build a culture of security as well as learning. And I think many organizations are actually becoming very aware of this need. So let's quickly get into the Q&A part of this webinar. and tackle some of the questions our attendees have submitted. So Damian, our first question. If upper management and IT staff are at most risk, should we focus only on them?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting question. It's a question we get asked a lot. There is definitely some additional risk to upper management in different areas, like the finance, like we talked about before. But at the same time, you know, going back to, again, what I said before, if we get a foothold within the organization, anywhere within the organization, some of the biggest attacks have come in through different areas like HR, you know, or, you know, areas that aren't typically seen as being high risk. So if you can get access into an environment, you can get access to pretty much everything anyway. So we recommend giving everyone access to the core fundamentals, the core things that they need to know to build that security culture and to build up the environment. Once you've done that, absolutely start to focus specifically on those higher risk individuals with maybe more targeted information. So for example, the finance people, let's target them with BEC training or something like that, which they specifically should know about. You know, by starting to do that, you're changing the culture across the whole environment, but you're also able to start focusing in on the people that specifically need specific training as well.
Thanks, Damian. That's a great question from one of our attendees. Do you have any tips on how to make courses relevant and help staff understand how this impacts them personally or their family?
Yeah, sure. So, look, the way that we approach it is that we start off by, in the communication plan, by specifically talking about how it will impact them. So we talk about how phishing has become a risk, not just to the organization, but to them specifically at home, and how what they're going to learn will really help them improve or potentially be the protector of their family. Once you go into the training, look, it depends. If you're trying to change a course that you've already got and it is kind of dull and boring and it's very, what's the word I'm looking for, you know, very staunch in the way that you approach things, then it's going to be very hard to tie that into a home life. The way that we've approached it with a fun, friendly kind of environment is it allows you then to focus it allows the training to focus on how it will help them at home. We use that sort of communication and that sort of touch point pretty much everywhere. Everywhere where we're saying it'll help the organization, we're talking about how it will help them at home.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. Damian, you speak of measurable programs, but is there a basic way to measure awareness?
Yeah, measurable is, it depends. So you can absolutely measure awareness, but there's different components. You can't measure necessarily awareness as a whole, but you can measure specific parts of that. So as an example, if you wanted to measure phishing, well, that's easy. You can measure phishing based on click-through rates, etc. That's a simple one. If you wanted to measure tailgating, well, then you could do things like have an internal audit or test to test that, or you could do a red teaming exercise. You know, there's different components. You need to sort of understand what part of the awareness you want to test and then measure it. But it's not necessarily going to be a measure that you have within your LMS all the time, but there is different ways to measure the success of the awareness program.
Thanks, Damian. That's a wrap up our Q&A session, and thank you all for your questions. Let's have a look at some of the poll results, shall we?
Oops, yep.
Okay, so this is quite interesting. 28% of people say, when asked the question, what best describes your organization's security awareness posture, 28% of our attendees say that they have a measurable security awareness program in place. 39% say they run ad hoc training sessions for compliance purposes. and 33% say that they will implement a program in the next 12 months.
Yeah, this is one of the ones that I said before actually surprised me. So only less than a third of people on the call actually have a security awareness program in place. That sounds, fairly formalized. People not running a program, that's obviously a concern. And then what we also see is that organizations that are running training just for compliance quite often aren't building that security culture. They're building let's make a tick box for compliance. Now, obviously, it could be different. So I can only comment on what I'm seeing in the polls here, but that'll be interesting. It is interesting to me to see that less than a third of people actually have a measurable security awareness training program in place.
Okay, and for the next question, are your executives more aware or less aware of the need to build a security awareness culture than they were 12 months ago? Now, 0% said less aware, 94% said that they're more aware, and 6% said that there's no change.
Yeah, how great is that? That's actually really great. I think that a lot of that comes from the ransomware and the BEC attacks that we're seeing at the moment. I could be wrong, but that's driving the awareness of awareness, and really strong results. Very, very impressed with that, actually.
In closing, thanks to everyone for attending today's webinar. Please complete the survey and let us know what topics you'd like for us to cover next. Everyone will receive a copy of the recording via email, and we'll also be posting today's session on our website. Once again, thank you for attending, and thanks, Damian, for your time. Have a cyber safe day.